altered. Mr. Douglas had his suspicions that Helen must have been looking beautiful, since even his wife could not detect, or at least specify, the faults that were to be found in her appearance. He had seldom seen her so much at fault for a criticism. Mrs. Douglas had never had the slightest pretensions to good looks. In fact, though it is wrong to say anything so ill-natured, she was excessively plain, always had been so, and had a soreness on the subject of beauty that looked perhaps as like envy as any other quality. As she had no hope of raising herself to the rank of a beauty, her only chance was bringing others down to her own level. "How old she is looking! How she is altered!" were the expressions that invariably concluded Mrs. Douglas's comments on her acquaintances, and the prolonged absence of a friend was almost a pleasure to her, as it gave her the opportunity of saying after a first meeting, "How changed Mrs. So-and-so is! I should hardly have known her. But then, to be sure, I have not seen her for a year or 2 years," etc. People may go on talking forever of the jealousies of pretty women, but for real, genuine, hard-working envy, there is nothing like an ugly woman with a taste for admiration. Her mortified vanity curdles into malevolence, and she calumniates where she cannot rival. Mrs. Douglas had been an heiress, which perhaps accounted for Mr. Douglas having married her, but though no one could suppose that he married for love, he had been to her what is called a good husband. He let her have a reasonable share of her own way, and spend a reasonable portion of her own money. He abstained from all vivid admiration of beauty within her hearing. He had a great reliance on her judgment, and a high opinion of her talents, and though he was too good-hearted to hear without pain her sarcasms on almost all her acquaintance, he seldom irritated her by contradiction, but kept his own opinion with a quiet regret that his wife was so hard to please. The Eskdales and Douglases had been near neighbours for many years, and had always been on sociable and sometimes intimate terms. Mrs. Douglas could almost have become attached to her neighbour, had it not been for the prolonged youthfulness of Lady Eskdale's appearance, and the uninterrupted and increasing prosperity of her family. The provocation grew too great for endurance. The ladies had become mothers at the same time, and the comparison of their babies, monthly nurses, and embroidered caps had been the commencement of their intimacy. Then came the engagement of nursery governesses, and discussions on the comparative merits of Swiss bonnes, highly accomplished French governesses, poor clergymen daughters, or respectable young ignorant women. Then the respective right shoulders of Sophia Beaufort and Sarah Douglas took a fit of growing, without due regard to the stationary dispositions of the left. There are 2 years in every woman's life in which the undue size of her right shoulder is the bane of her own life and of everybody about her. Mrs. Douglas called constantly at Eskdale Castle to satisfy her that Sophia was growing absolutely deformed, and Lady Eskdale owned she should fret dreadfully about her poor darling if she did not think Mrs. Douglas so much more to be pitied on her dear Sarah's account. The girls grew up perfectly straight, of course. This period of reclining boards and dumbbells was the most flourishing age of the Eskdale and Douglas friendship. After that it gradually declined. There was a slight revival when the two ladies entered into a confederacy against an exorbitant drawing-master, but he was shortly reduced to terms, and when he had consented to walk 15 miles and give a lesson of 2 hours for 15 shillings instead of a guinea, all farther community of interests on the subject of accomplishments ceased. The Eskdales soon after received an accession of fortune, and passed a great part of each year in another county, and also in London. The ladies Beaufort grew up, came out, were admired, and became what Mrs. Douglas called disgustingly fine. The Douglas family remained in the country, mixed more with their second grade of neighbours, in default of their great friends, and the Misses Douglas were, Lady Eskdale said, the dearest, most amiable girls in the world. She only wished they dressed better, and that Lord Eskdale did not think them vulgar. But unfortunately their voices annoyed him, so that she could not ask them to dinner so often as she could like, for dear Mrs. Douglas's sake.